Welcome back, everybody, to a very special edition of both the Junkyard Dogcast and the Auburn Undercover podcast. I am Jordan Hill, the host of the Junkyard Dogcast. Got Nathan King from Auburn Undercover with me, and we are going to preview another edition of the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Getting ready, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on Saturday night. Number 10, Georgia, taking on the Auburn Tigers in Jordan-Hare Stadium. We're looking forward to what we think will be another exciting edition of this rivalry, and we decided we would sort of join forces on this episode, take turns going back and forth, talking about Georgia, talking about Auburn, and dive into this game, what we make of these two teams, maybe give some predictions a little bit later on, and really cover everything there is to cover about a very interesting matchup in this long-standing rivalry. So first off, Nathan, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. How are things out on the plains as Auburn gets ready for this big game?
Doing good. Yeah, always look forward to this episode. I hope our listeners do as well. Yeah, for our Auburn listeners, you can tell it's the Georgia guy batting leadoff when he gives the Eastern Time game designation because I'm always going Central. Did you see that tweet a few weeks ago where it was somebody talking about like the Egg Bowl rivalry, or they're talking, it was some Ole Miss or Mississippi State fan, and they were playing their game in the afternoon slot, and he said, "You know what? We're gonna find out at 3:30 on Saturday." And somebody quote tweeted, and they said 3:30 in quotes, and it was the Inglorious Bastards, like holding up the three. It's so good. It's like that guy does not live in Mississippi.
Yeah, I always try to watch out for my Central Standard Time folks out there, especially with any of these SEC games. You know, a lot of the teams like when Georgia and Alabama play. Um, I'm gonna say Eastern Time first for my Junkyard Dogcast listeners, but I'm gonna look out for my Auburn folks. You know, I spent some time out there. I'll make sure they're covered.
Well, they appreciate that. We all know you're just a closeted Auburn fan at the end of the day. So
Yeah, that we've covered that quite well on X, the Everything app, so you can go check it out there. Well, Nathan, I'll kind of start the conversation here, looking at Auburn and kind of looking more big picture. Auburn's 3-2 right now. They're coming off of a loss at Oklahoma, a loss at Texas A&M, followed by a bye week. Where do you think the team is right now, just going into this big game? They've had a week to try to refocus, reset. What's sort of the mood around this team as they get ready for this game?
I mean, Hugh Freeze and the players maintain that. I think the phrase Freeze used yesterday on the teleconference was, there's no Debbie Downers around here. I think they are choosing, and for good reason, they are choosing to embrace the mindset of, hey, you were really close to beating a couple top 10 teams, what are now both top 10 teams in Oklahoma and Texas A&M. You were really close to beating both of them on the road. In both those games, you had the ball in the fourth quarter with the chance to go down and win. You ended up losing by just one score in both of those games. That's kind of their mindset right now, and how can they finally get over the hump? The more glass half empty side of things that Auburn fans would argue is that if you actually watched those games, particularly Texas A&M, Oklahoma, I actually came away, and if you watched any of that game, like I came away being like, they're fine. Like, it's a tough place to play, and Jackson Earl got harassed the whole game, so it's like, they're okay. They led in the fourth quarter of that game with an impressive touchdown drive. Texas A&M felt nothing like that. The word I keep using, Jordan, the word I keep coming back to for Texas A&M was just incriminating. Like, it was the sum of everything you could have criticized Hugh Freeze about in his 3 seasons so far. Like, it was just a little bit of everything. And I think that's why, and like you said, you spent time covering Auburn, you know what this fan base is like. They get a bad rap sometimes. They are not ones to just lose 2 straight top 10 road games and be like, yeah, we got to fire this guy. It was more about what it looked like on the field. Like, everybody saw what that game looked like, the lack of preparedness from the team, confusing play calling, just an undisciplined team, the worst offensive performance in 8 seasons. You can't be doing that in year 3. Like, this is proof of concept time. There's no excuses about the roster anymore. And so, you asked about the attitude of the team. I think they're just fine. And a night game against Georgia is a solution for, even if they are down on themselves a little bit. Nobody's, you're absolutely going to get up for a game like that. But the fan base, little antsy. And I don't doubt at all. I don't doubt one bit that they're going to be fired up for Saturday. Like, you get an opportunity to beat your rival, beat a top 10 team. in your place, night game that Auburn's been looking forward to since the summer. This game was announced as a night game in the summer. So they're going to be fired up. But in terms of like the outlook, the future of the program, I have personally never seen one individual game in my time at Auburn that had this much effect on people as the Texas A&M game did.
Yeah, Stephen Fowler on YouTube wanted me to ask the last time they converted on third down. He's bringing that up because Auburn did not convert a third down against Texas A&M, and
It's like
I mean,
17 straight going back to Oklahoma. I think they've missed.
yeah, the statistic that you brought up in the aftermath of that game that still sticks with me, that Auburn would have been better off just spiking the ball on first and second down, given what they faced on average on third down. It's hard to defend something like that.
Yeah, and it goes back to the confusing portion of things where Hugh Freeze said in the lead up to both of those games, and again, A&M was a lot worse than Oklahoma, but in the lead up to Oklahoma, it's the same thing they were saying in the lead up to this game. Well, early downs are so key. The offensive coordinator Derek Nix then gets on their radio show the next week and says that was the entire game plan, was like get in 2nd and 6 as often as possible, 2nd and 7. That way it becomes a 3rd and 3, and Jackson Arnold's not dropping straight back on 3rd and 10. And then they gave the ball to their running backs 5 times on first down against Texas A&M. They gave it to their running backs 8 times in the entire game out of 62 offensive plays. So it's just like, you just have no answers for that. Like that's indefensible from a coaching perspective. And we talked to Freeze after practice today as we sit here and record this on Thursday, and he was asked by our buddy Brian Matthews. He said, for the dummies and the fans and the dummies up in the press box who don't know what they're looking at, he said, is this Auburn offense going to look different on Saturday? And Hugh Freeze said, it better. And I think that's a pretty good summation of where we are right now. This has to be, after a bye week, this has to be a corner turner for this program right now. They cannot put up the same performance against this Georgia team, or else, man, people are really going to start getting restless.
Yeah, I figured we would kind of bounce back and forth between talking about Auburn and talking about Georgia. So I'll give you the opportunity, Nathan. What's sort of on your mind with Georgia? Where do you want to go next?
Just how good you think this team is overall. I think conversations with you and looking at Georgia this week. Obviously, I remember a few weeks ago watching them get that win at Tennessee, and thinking that was really impressive, and wondering whether they were the best team in the SEC. Now losing to Alabama is not necessarily a poor indictment of your season. Like, Alabama looks to be really good, but it just doesn't look like. And you can correct me on either side of the ball, but the dominance we've come to expect from Georgia. Now, I think when you look at college football overall, you look at the top programs, I think that's an unfair thing that people say pretty often when you look at a team like, oh, Ohio State's not as explosive as we're used to on offense, or, oh, Georgia's not as dominant on defense. I think that's kind of unfair when people say that, because you cannot expect that to continue. What, Georgia have 11 first-round picks in the last 3 years or something to that effect on defense? You can't expect it to be the same over and over and over and over again. But you mentioned it in our Q&A that's going to be posted tomorrow. Like, Georgia has been taking a little bit of a step back on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm just curious kind of what your take has been so far in this season, and whether their record and what they've shown on the field has surprised you so far, or whether you're just like, yeah, we kind of knew this team would take a step back, and it's kind of just about where they go from here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just the defense, and I think got we made a little too much, I think, of the first 2 weeks. When you play a Marshall, you play Austin P, and the defense was lights out, but you'd expect them to play really well. And I think this defense is not quite as good as we expected. And the two areas in particular, defensive line, they've really struggled getting a pass rush. Didn't really do a great job of that against Tennessee. But really didn't do that against Alabama. I mean, Ty Simpson just had all day, and credit to Ty Simpson. I mean, he did a good job of taking advantage, and Georgia played a lot of zone in the first half of that game. He just picked it apart. And when you give a quarterback with that kind of talent, that amount of time, it's just not going to work out for you. And the secondary has been very iffy. Struggled against Tennessee, gave up a lot of explosive plays. Several of them wound up being touchdowns. Didn't play great against Alabama, though I thought the Tennessee performance was really the one that kind of got all of our attention. And I wanted to make the point too, Nathan. You talked about what they've lost to the NFL, and trying to retool every year and regroup. The draft does matter. Georgia lost three first rounders from last year's defense. I kind of think it's as much too about the transfer portal and guys that traditionally, would have waited in the wings for a year, 2 years, and then get that opportunity. A lot of those guys aren't at Georgia anymore, and it's not really a Georgia specific thing. I mean, you see the depth in the SEC alone. Guys transferring, getting opportunities to play elsewhere. Look at a guy like Damon Wilson, who had been at Georgia, is at Missouri now. And if I'm not mistaken, he's got like as many quarterback pressures so far this season at Missouri as the entire Georgia defense. I think it's a situation where, Georgia, at the height of its powers with Kirby Smart, they just stack depth. And if those guys didn't play right away, it wasn't an issue. Those guys were going to wait their turn. They've got opportunities now where they can leave and they can go shine elsewhere and get opportunity. I think you're seeing it with this defense. I say all that to say I still think this is a Georgia team that can make the playoff, can still be in that hunt. But I think the defense has to step up. And more than anything, they just need guys on defense to rise to the occasion, to make more plays. Guys that we know are talented, they have to be more productive going forward.
And on the flip side of things, getting your opinion here on this Georgia offense, we saw Gunnar Stockton last season, so he is kind of in the same vein of a Ty Simpson type, where it's like it's not a surprise that he took over at Georgia. That familiarity with the program is obviously great. What has he looked like now in his first season as a full time starter? And I know that the power run game, I know that's what Georgia likes to do, but as I'm sure we'll get into later, you just talked about the defensive line of scrimmage. The offensive line of scrimmage is interesting as well because you're playing more young guys than you want to. You've got some injury question marks here and there. I know they've got this talent at receiver this season. That's what Hugh Freeze has highlighted this week. He keeps saying this is the best Georgia's been at receiver in a few years. I guess he's particularly talking about somebody like Zachariah Branch. But how well has this group gelled together so far, and just how pivotal have those injuries been on the offensive line, having to play so many young guys?
Yeah, starting with Gunner, I think really in the last week against Kentucky, I thought you saw from him feeling more comfortable, being willing to sit in the pocket. I think early in the season you saw he didn't completely rely or feel like he could count on that offensive line in front of him, and he bailed from the pocket a little bit early, rush throws. Again, I think it's a fair caveat to say they were playing Kentucky, and this Kentucky team's not very good. I think their defense is okay. I thought he looked more comfortable. I thought you saw him more consistently work through his reads, go through his progressions, and trust the offensive line in front of him. And big part of the conversation this entire week, and I think going into Saturday night, has been this Georgia offensive line. Probably going to be starting two true freshmen again, Dontrell Glover at right guard, Juan Gaston at right tackle. And the question is what they're going to do at left tackle. Monroe Freeling hurt his ankle against Kentucky. He's listed as questionable as we record this. I think it's just going to be a situation where they get into the pregame and see what he's able to do. I think they would feel so much more comfortable if he was available, just because he's an experienced guy at this point, especially compared to the other guys that would have a chance to play there. I think if it's not him, it would be Bo Hughley, a redshirt freshman who, uh, you know, I think actually he's a redshirt sophomore. He's a guy that Auburn fans should probably remember. Georgia and Auburn were in a dogfight in his recruitment. He committed to Georgia. There was a point where I thought there was a pretty good chance he was going to flip to Auburn. He sticks with Georgia, and he's bided his time and he's waited his turn. And he's got a chance to wind up playing on Saturday night, and will be counted on to protect Gunnar Stockton's blind side if Monroe Freeland can't go. And talking about the receivers, I think that Hugh Freeze is on the money, that this is the best wide receiver core that Georgia's had in quite some time. It's definitely, I mean, it is night and day compared to last year. That group last year led the nation in drops. I think they ended the season with 36. You go get Zachariah Branch from USC. Went and added Noah Thomas from Texas A&M, and I mean, honestly, he's kind of been MIA. He's played quite a bit, but he really hasn't had a ton of targets. Certainly doesn't have a lot of receptions, but right now it's been Zachariah Branch, it's been Colby Young. Colby, who I think if this game is tight, if Georgia's in a situation where they're trying to drive late in this game and they're counting on a receiver to make a play, I would watch for Colby Young. I think he would be the guy that gets targeted. Dylan Bell had a huge game last week. I think he needed that because he's kind of been quiet to start the year, but a veteran guy, a guy that this is his fourth year at Georgia, they know they can rely on. And then London Humphreys, too, a guy that they got from Vanderbilt before last season. He's really taken strides and he's played a big role in this offense. So, we haven't seen the tight ends in this passing game quite as much as we're used to, but they've taken advantage of the receivers, and I think it's made Gunner's job that much easier. They know that there's not just one guy. Auburn can't say, well, if we shut down Zachariah Branch, Georgia's offense just doesn't have a chance. They've got a lot of guys that I think they're confident in, and if this game is tight, you could see the ball pretty much go anywhere. I think that they feel pretty good about their options in this pass game.
Yeah, it's going to be such an interesting matchup from that perspective because I think this is an Auburn defense that feels like it's gotten a lot better since that first week of the year. There were tackling issues against Baylor in week one. There were missed assignments all over the place, and they took a long look at what personnel they were using, whether they wanted to play the young guys a lot, whether they wanted to sit them. And it's ended up they've rotated a ton of young guys this season. That they've not been afraid to put freshmen on the field. That pass rush has been pretty darn good, probably the best in 2 or 3 years here at Auburn. Georgia fans need to know Kieran Crawford, number 24. He's been really, really good this season. Keldrick Falk is the name, like the first round name to know. He sees a lot of double teams, and so you don't necessarily see the stat production from him. And then Xavier Atkins is an LSU transfer at linebacker who I don't know how many tackles he has this season, but he is, from the outside looking in, a huge surprise on this team. Obviously not a surprise to people in Auburn because you go back to preseason camp and he's been lighting it up. He didn't do anything at LSU last year. He's a recruit from like a 3-star recruit from Texas, didn't even get on the field at LSU. Actually, DJ Durkin wanted him really badly at Texas A&M when he was the DC there. Now you see why. I mean, he is making plays all over the place. He had basically what I'll call a pick six against Texas A&M because he put Auburn at the 2-yard line before Jackson Arnold scored a touchdown in that game. And so, yeah, I mean, this to me, this has the makings of a 4-quarter defensive battle when you consider what these teams have done so far this season. But as you know, Jordan, that probably means it's going to be, Christian said this in our picks this morning, whenever we're sitting here saying that, it's going to be like 38-35, something like that. These offenses are just going to light it up for no reason. But I feel pretty confident Auburn's defense can make this a 4-quarter game. But that also means like if Georgia's got like 17 at halftime, 24 at halftime, that is probably not a good sign for Auburn.
Yeah, the point you just made about the low scoring game and expectations versus reality. I thought Georgia Tennessee was going to be a game where we did not see a lot of points. Well, that one ended up 44-41. So, that shows you how much I know on that front. Flipping it back to you, Nathan, got to talk about Jackson Arnold. I feel like that been some ups and downs so far in his first season as Auburn's quarterback. What do you make of what he's done to this point, and what has to be better if Auburn's going to win this game on Saturday night?
Yeah, everything was hunky dory after the first game. If you remember, really before most teams in the country had even played their first game, Auburn plays on Friday at Baylor. They run for 307 yards against the Bears on the road. Of course, Baylor's defense is terrible, but you're supposed to do that against bad defense. You're supposed to just do whatever you want. And he was the main reason for that. He was the catalyst. Auburn realized that very quickly. They started adjusting during that game and realizing, oh, like he can get out and run the ball. Really physical runner. Kirby Smart talked about it this week. I thought his description of him, hey, he's not just an escape artist, was pretty apt. Like that is also what I would say about Jackson. He is a downhill physical runner. But that's been about the last couple games the only thing that has worked for him really consistently. Because the issues that we've seen going back to the preseason, it's funny how things don't change, right? Like when red flags go up on August 10th, maybe pay attention to them and don't forget about them when September 10th comes. Because in the preseason, what we heard about Jackson Arnold in this passing game is pass protection is shaky. Now we wondered, is Auburn's pass rush really good, or does the O-line have some issues? Turns out the O-line is not very good pass protecting, and Jackson Arnold's holding on to the ball too long. You might recall that video that was going around, Hugh Freeze like throwing his visor at practice. It was because Jackson Arnold had a receiver in a drill and chose not to just let it rip and keep scanning the field. And Hugh Freeze got really upset, telling him to make that throw. It's been a lot of ups and downs. The last 2 weeks in particular have not been very pretty. The Oklahoma game was interesting because, like, I think you just look at the stats and you say, "Oh my gosh, he got sacked 9 times against his former team." Like, they had his number all game. He threw for 220 yards and had, like, in terms of net adjusted, I guess would sack adjusted is the word I'm looking for. Sack adjusted, like 70 rushing yards. Now that's not what actually happened, but like he got out and ran a few times. I thought he was pretty solid in that game. Texas A&M was just a disaster. I mean, just an absolute disaster. There is a screen grab of 3 or 4 open wide receivers in which he's just staring at one of them and he's just not making the throw. And so Hugh Freeze talked this week. He said, "Look, Jackson needs to play more free. If you see an opening, you need to let it rip." But I also think he is, unfortunately for quarterbacks who've been at Auburn the last few years, he is also mixed up in a situation where nothing's going very well. Yeah, I mentioned the play calling before. There aren't a lot of quarterbacks in the country when you put them in 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14, 3rd and 16. There's penalties as well that have pushed Auburn back. There aren't a lot of quarterbacks who would succeed consistently in those situations, but it is a perfect storm, or at least it was against Texas A&M, a perfect storm of bad because he's having trouble getting the ball out. Teams are spying him, so he can't scramble out, and it's just like he's got nothing. And so it really is interesting, Jordan, that we sit here in week 7, and what are we, 21 minutes into this podcast? I have not said the name Cam Coleman or Eric Singleton a single time. And that is probably the biggest issue with this entire season for Auburn right now is like, people keep saying, "Oh, they need to run the ball. They need to get back to running the football. Their bread and butter, their DNA." And it's like they spent all this money and plotted all these big recruiting wins at wide receiver, and I don't know if they remember offensive line or the fact that you need to control the line of scrimmage. And so it's just so funny we're going into this game and people really want to see Auburn get back on the ground because they just haven't been able to throw the ball. And when there's been opportunities, when Cam Coleman is open and when they get the ball to him, yeah, he's awesome. Like he's one of the best receivers in the country. Eric Singleton is extremely consistent. He's going to be the guy Jackson's going to target like 9 times a game. He's going to have 7 or 8 catches. He's going to do that. Maybe only 60 yards or so, but he's going to be really consistent. But right now, whether it's protection, whether it's penalties, whether it's game planning, whether it's play calling, it's just a perfect storm right now of all this offensive talent they upgraded with, including a 5-star quarterback, which Jackson Arnold is. It's just not working out very well right now.
Yeah, the Jackson Arnold piece of this matchup I find fascinating, mainly because when you look at Georgia traditionally under Kirby Smart, the games where they struggle, it's a guy with Jackson Arnold's skill set. It's a guy that can, not only run for big plays, but also just keep plays alive, extend plays. And, you know, I feel like a lot of what I wrote, Nathan, in looking at this matchup, and it kind of feels like a cop out, but I do think there's something to it. When I talk to Kirby Smart, when I talk to players, you kind of look at Auburn as far as the potential on offense. It's like, yeah, they haven't been able to do this, especially in those 2 road losses. But in theory, you've got a very talented quarterback. You've got those wide receivers. And when we get into this matchup, I mean, I think it matters that Georgia's secondary has been vulnerable. They had issues covering downfield against Tennessee, and it had Tennessee on the doorstep of winning that game. There's just a lot when it comes to this specific matchup. For me, as someone looking at Auburn, it's like this is the opportunity for Auburn if they want to get this done. But it's a matter of Jackson Arnold putting it together. It's a matter of the entire offensive staff putting it together. And I did want to mention, too, Georgia knows Eric Singleton well. I think he had 86 receiving yards and a touchdown against Georgia in the Georgia Tech game last year, just an 8 overtime thriller. The pieces are there. For me, it's just a matter of can they put it together?
And that's been the question. And now you get to a year 3, and this is kind of a more overarching answer, but it's like, again, if you had this kind of performance, and they have had these kinds of performances against Texas A&M, as Jeff Shearer, our good friend, pointed out to me, when Jackson Arnold scored that touchdown, it was Auburn's first offensive touchdown in College Station since 2019. So it's been quite a minute since they've performed well on the road there. But when it gets to year 3, you stop like giving excuses for things like that. When it gets to year 3, you stop talking in the lead up to the Georgia game about how many great recruits are going to be here and how great of an atmosphere it is. Instead, it's like, no, you got to go. Like, it's time to win this thing. It is time to start turning the page and being a competitive team and a competitive roster. Yeah, I mean, You're exactly right. In theory, and that's why Auburn, I think, was a popular pick this season to like, hey, they'll probably be pretty good. Maybe a bit of a turnaround season because their roster is pretty awesome. Like they have more dudes, and you'll see it on Saturday. In terms of getting off the bus, this is a good looking Auburn team. There's some freshmen on that defense that are, I think, if they make the right plays and do the right things in college, they're going to be NFL players. Uh, Cam Coleman looks like a first round pick, and he's a sophomore. You mentioned Eric Singleton, Mr. Consistency. Jackson Arnold, when he steps on a platform and lets that thing rip, I mean, he is a very impressive passer. He's a great athlete. Their offensive line in the preseason, apparently, as we're told, you wouldn't know it now, was 6 of their guys were given a quote draftable grade by NFL scouts. And now it's kind of the point where it's like, well, I guess anybody could technically be drafted. I don't really know what that means, but it all the pieces are kind of together. And that is where you sort of see the frustrations build with this fan base right now. Because I think people are smart. In the first couple of years, it was like, especially that first season. I don't know if you remember that first Auburn-Georgia game where Robbie Ashford was kind of doing his thing. Auburn had nobody at wide receiver. Their offensive line was patchwork. Connor Lew is starting as a true freshman at center. Their leading tacklers on defense are people you have never heard of because they're transfers from nowhere. No offense. I'm just saying they're not like top 100 recruits. Now you're not like that. I did that talent comparison story this week, and it's like they're getting there. And Georgia's the gold standard of talent. Absolutely. They're number one in the talent composite. They haven't recruited outside the top 3 since Kirby's been there. Like it's the gold mine for talented college football players. And Auburn's actually matching up pretty decently at a lot of different spots across the field. So now it makes you, as we kind of circle the drain and get back to the point here, it's like it makes you wonder who all that falls on to get it all in the right place. It's coaching. People are going to start to realize that now. So whether Auburn gets this win, whether Auburn turns it around this season, it is no longer a referendum on anybody else except for Hugh Freeze. And we'll see whether that's a good thing for him or not.
You mentioned that touchdown at Kyle Field that Jackson Arnold had. Our buddy Kip Adams wanted me to bring up Georgia's last offensive touchdown in Kyle Field. That is to say, Georgia has still not played at Texas A&M, so he wanted me to get that in there. So that was a nice little nugget
Hey,
there.
Greg Sankey, you're doing a great job, man. Like you're so good. You're great with the whole schedule thing. It's awesome. Great work.
Yeah, I got to talk to my guy Greg for Georgia Alabama. So sweet to catch up with Mr. Commish.
John Cohen's best friend.
Yes, something
Their
like
best
that.
buddy.
All right, Nathan, what else you want to know about Georgia?
Oh, looking at this game, I mean, I guess just we talked a lot about the offense there. You mentioned the interesting matchup with a guy like Jackson Arnold, and the stats that I was looking at this week are really interesting from a Georgia perspective on their pass rush and whether they can actually get after the quarterback this season. Because correct me if I'm wrong, it's only like 7 sacks for them this year, only one by a defensive lineman, right? And so that to me that kind of reads they've had to get creative to bring pressure. They've had to bring extra bodies. And so this kind of circles back to an earlier thing you said that I completely agree with. I actually like this matchup for Auburn in a lot of different areas. It's like the things that they have kind of been iffy about, Georgia's also kind of iffy about. So I don't think Georgia overwhelms Auburn in any one point of this game. And so I'm interested your perspective on that other line of scrimmage because Auburn's O line and pass protection, not very good at all. But can Georgia take advantage of it, or Jackson Arnold maybe will have an opportunity to throw the ball this game?
Yeah, to this point, like you said, Georgia's got 7 sacks, 6 from inside linebackers, and I mean, really the biggest surprise, the one defensive lineman is Nnamdi Agboko. He's a nose tackle. He's not one of their starters, so it's sort of been perplexing how this defensive line has not been more productive when it comes to rushing the passer. And yeah, I'll throw in Kirby Smart has said he likes what the pass rush has done to this point. He feels like, or at least it's what he said. That a lot of it is just opportunity. With a guy like Ty Simpson getting the ball out quick, Joe Aguilar did something very similar, and they did have 2 sacks against Kentucky, but again, we know the situation at Kentucky, and if I'm remembering correctly, South Carolina sacked their quarterback Cutter Boley 6 times. So, it's just for whatever reason, they have really struggled to get to the quarterback. And I think this is sort of, and I'm going to have a column on Friday about the defense, and it's like this is your opportunity. I mean, we're talking about an Auburn offensive line that has struggled to the point that we're talking about Xavier Chaplin not being able to hear. I mean, like this being a unit that has struggled, and you're going on the road, and you have to have it. And I think that given what's at stake, really more so for Auburn, I think there are everybody on the Georgia side understands that Auburn sees this as a real opportunity. Georgia's got to have guys step up as pass rushers, whether it's Gabe Harris, whether it's Quintavious Johnson, whether it's Joseph Jonah Ajonye, whether it's some of the inside guys. I mean, Elijah Griffin is a defensive tackle, but you're a 5-star if you're, Georgia's top-rated recruit in this past recruiting cycle. You've got to get after the quarterback just as well as you can stuff the run. It's one of those things, Nathan. I knew that they were unproven. I mean, Jalen Walker was their best pass rusher last year at inside linebacker, but you lose him. I knew that they would have to have guys step up, but to this point, they just haven't. And this is a game where you can't afford to be quiet when it comes to rushing the passer. You got to get to Jackson Arnold. You've got to take advantage of a suspect Auburn offensive line because, again, if you don't, that's a golden opportunity for Auburn to take advantage and Auburn have a chance to pull off an upset.
Yeah, and you have to know in this game too, if you're Georgia, that Auburn is going to be kitchen sink and all in terms of an offensive game plan. Not even just the fact that they had that bye week, which I think is a storyline here. Like any other matchup, I know Auburn's offense hasn't been good, but having that bye week to prepare, I think is a big deal. But also the fact that they are just so eager. I mean, I mentioned what Hugh Freeze said on Thursday of the offense better be different. I mean, he said it was a tireless bye week for that staff. He said he was up there at the facility with them every single day, just trying to evaluate, just trying to figure out what has gone wrong. And I think he's been a lot more involved because he is an offensive coach, but he's got his hands in a lot of different areas when it comes to the program. But I think he sort of committed himself this last week to more of the offensive film meetings and meetings with the quarterbacks and receivers and stuff like that. And so if you're Georgia, yeah, you got to be on your P's and Q's in this game because we've seen crazy stuff happen in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and usually it also takes the form of like Auburn plays better than they have been playing. It looked like it a couple years ago. And here's what's really interesting to me too, Jordan, is that Hugh Freeze said it today. He said he's trying to instill confidence in this Auburn offensive line. He said he showed them film from the last two Auburn-Georgia games because most of these guys are the same. And apparently there were a lot of plays over the last couple of years. I think he's probably right. The last year's game kind of got away from them, but it wasn't like complete domination the whole way. He said there have been a lot of plays over the last few years where Auburn's held up very well against Georgia's defensive front, particularly that game 2 years ago. And all three of their interior guys are exactly the same. Their two tackles are new. And so he's been trying to instill that confidence of like, look, we know they're Georgia, but you have proven you can go out there and do it. Now you just got to do it on a play-by-play basis. And so yeah, this is such an interesting game of like what's going to give. Is it going to just be super low scoring where both sides are continuing to have some struggles here and there? Because I can't think of a better get right game for Georgia's defense than teeing off against Auburn. But at the same time, Georgia has not been overwhelming on defense, so maybe Auburn has an opportunity at home to figure some things out after a bye week. And so this is definitely, in terms of like storylines and matchups, this is one of the more interesting Auburn-Georgia games of the last few seasons, in my opinion, mainly because it's not just a foregone conclusion that Georgia's going to come in here and just kill this Auburn team like I've expected them to the last 2 seasons.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think that there's a lot of even just individual matchups that are just fascinating, whether it's either offensive line and how they play in the trenches, whether it's Auburn's receivers against the Georgia secondary. There's a lot to pay attention to there and to understand it could be what sways what I think will be a very tight game. Nathan, tell me about this Auburn defense. It seems like that has been the strength of this team. Who are some of the names to know, and how would you describe the way they've played on defense at this point in the season?
Yeah, biggest compliment you can pay to somebody like DJ Durkin is adjustment. And that's kind of what you always want to hear when you're a defensive coach. They're usually on their heels on the first couple drives, and that's no surprise. I mean, people have good scripts, unless you're Auburn, and then your scripts are terrible and you go 3 and out every time. But people usually can get you on those first couple drives. Texas A&M was a great example. I mean, Texas A&M walked down the field for a touchdown. I mean, did whatever they wanted and then had nothing the rest of the game. I mean, just absolutely in hell. Marcel Reed was. They could barely run the ball until just a couple different runs. So they've done a really good job of that. I mean, it is so interesting, Jordan, because I think, we're around it in the preseason. When you're around coaches and players, they're always like, yeah, this guy's going to get on the field. This guy has an opportunity to play this year, and this young guy's going to make a difference for us. Usually doesn't all hold up. There's only 11 guys. This is the first time in a while it's like, no, everybody that Auburn's defense said will play this season is playing. Like, they play a ton of guys, and so depth is really their strong suit right now. I mean, it's tough to really say. Their secondary has done a good job of responding. I'm trying to think about what the strongest part of this team is right now. Front seven has been very impressive, as I mentioned, the guys to watch there. They've done a good job of offsetting the fact they don't have a star defensive tackle. Malik Blockton, the sophomore, is maybe your best player there. Dallas Walker, who's maybe a name you remember from like Texas A&M, he's a highly rated recruit, went to Western Kentucky. He's been pretty decent here as a transfer as well. Bobby Jameson Travis he's been okay. They don't have a bunch of superstars there at defensive tackle, but they just rotate a bunch, play a bunch of guys, play a bunch of names. They're playing a couple true freshmen at linebacker. Elijah Melendez, I think, was a Georgia target, if I want to say. He was a guy who's committed to Miami, maybe not. But he's a guy who's played really well as a true freshman. But the secondary is where things are the most interesting. They made a lot of changes there. They've benched a couple guys who just like weren't playing very well. Sylvester Smith is a veteran who went into the season as your starter at nickel. Excuse me, he just doesn't play anymore. It's just that it's not working for him, and other guys have been a lot better. They'll rotate a ton of guys. Eric Winters, speaking of Georgia targets, I know that was a guy they were interested in. Anquan Fagans, everybody wanted him out of high school, out of Thompson. They both play a ton. Kay and Lee and Jay Crawford have been very solid at cornerback on the outside. And Caleb Harris at safety has been solid. Champ Anthony's getting healthier. It's a bend don't break defense. It's done a good job so far this season of holding every team well under their scoring average. I mean, they really haven't given up that many points this season, but they believe there's more in the tank. They believe they can do a better job, that they can have less missed assignments. I mean, after that Oklahoma game, they were distraught. I mean, they hold Oklahoma to 22 on their home field, which is awesome. But John Mateer got the ball back with 5 minutes left and took him down the field for a game-winning score. And so it's like, yes, you did your job most of the way, but they felt bad that offense gave them the lead, and then they Oklahoma went right down the field and scored. And so, yeah, they feel like they have an opportunity to get even better. I think as all those young guys keep playing, they will get even better. Definitely the bright spot on the team right now. But as you know, Jordan, that is nothing new. You can go all the way back to the Kevin Steele, Gus Malzahn years. Like, Kevin Steele usually had a pretty darn good defense, and there were usually lots of questions about execution and quarterback play and all that on Gus's offenses. That's continued the last several seasons as well.
I've got one more question before we wind up taking a break. But first, I want to throw it back to you. What else do you want to know on the Georgia front?
Yeah, I mean, I know we'll get into X factors and matchups and stuff like that, but it's funny that we're sitting here talking about Auburn-Georgia and talking about Georgia in particular, and haven't talked that much about Georgia's run game. And because Auburn's run defense right now is number 6 nationally in yards per carry. Early on in the season, it was like, okay, you just weren't playing that many teams that wanted to run the ball very much. Oklahoma a little bit, did a pretty decent job against Texas A&M. As I mentioned, it's just a couple big runs from Le'Veon Moss, but other than that, have done a really good job. They've been very solid on the front seven, getting hands on guys, playing at linebacker. Probably their best linebacker play in 2 or 3 seasons. Do you see this being a game where Georgia will try to impose their will on the ground like Auburn is going to do? Auburn is absolutely going to try to run the ball and establish things there because, again, Hugh Freeze keeps pointing to these Georgia wide receivers. I haven't heard him talk about these Georgia running backs yet in this Georgia running game. What have you made of them in that facet so far this season?
I think they've done a great job of responding after really an entire offseason where the marching orders from Kirby Smart and the staff was we want to run the ball better and we want to stop the run better than we did in 2024. 2024, Nathan, one of the worst years for Georgia in terms of running the ball. I mean, at least in the modern era. And you think about Georgia's history with running the ball. I mean, that might go even further back, 50 or 60 years. They finished, I think, 15th in the SEC in rushing yards per game last year. It was just something they really struggled with, but they've done a great job of really getting things back on track with the run game. And I'd be remiss not to start with Chauncey Bowens, redshirt freshman who has really stepped up, had a fantastic game. Kind of, I thought his, sort of announcement to the rest of the country about how good he is against Alabama. I think he averaged something like 7 yards a carry in that game. He played really well. And again, this is, the shout out is deserved to the offensive line, who we've talked about. They've had a lot of different guys in the mix, but so far, even with the different lineups, they've done a really good job as far as blocking it, run blocking, and giving those backs opportunities. Chauncey got his first career start last week against Kentucky. I'm anticipating that'll be the case again against Auburn. Nate Frazier has had some fumbling issues, but I thought he really took a step forward and seemed to bounce back well against Kentucky. He had a critical fumble against Alabama. I think you'll see a good bit of him. Cash Jones remains the third down back. He of 4th and 1 infamy in the Alabama game, but he is still relied on quite a bit, and you'll see him quite a bit as well. And then Josh McCray, an Enterprise Alabama native who transferred in from Illinois, he's sort of become the short yardage back, the goal line back, the guy they get in there. I mean, he's like 240, 245, and he can push the pile forward. And I will say this, I mean, the Georgia's receivers have really stepped up. They've played well, but it would be very dangerous to overlook this run game. I could totally see them going in and trying to rely on those guys and lean on those guys while knowing what Auburn can do defensively and the success they've had. Thought it was really telling during the Kentucky game. Some of the announcers on ESPN were talking about the conversation with Mike Bobo, and they said that Mike Bobo told them, "I got to be stubborn when it comes to running the football," because he knows what that can take out of a defense. And you go look at Georgia's first two drives of that Kentucky game, a lot of runs, some of it with Gunnar Stockton, some with Chauncey Bowens, but those drives were like a 12 play drive, a 14 play drive, both touchdown drives. I think if Georgia can get the ground game going, they would be totally comfortable leaning on it. One, because those backs, led by Chauncey Bowens, have done a good job picking up yards and being reliable. But two, I mean, just the wear and tear of giving up a 6 yard run and then giving up a 4 yard run and, getting a defense on its heels, I think is even more valuable on the road. I mean, think about if you're sitting in the stands and you're just like, man, we cannot get these guys off the field. They keep running the ball, and we just can't find a way to stop it.
Hmm. What an interesting mindset there from Mike Bobo. That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's all. That's all.
never, not relevant to any Auburn conversation at all.
Nope, not at all.
All right, my last question, and I usually bring this up on these preview podcasts in games where I think it will be relevant, games where I think it will be tight. What's the status of Auburn's special teams? Because this very well could be a game that comes down to a kick, comes down to trying to flip the field and field position. Where are things for the special teams at this point?
Much better. Much better. A few weeks ago, things were down terribly bad for this group. The one to note, I don't know how many Georgia fans, probably most people know about the condition of Alex McPherson, who's Auburn's kicker, younger brother of Evan McPherson, NFL kicker. Had a case of ulcerative colitis last year, and it kept him out all but one game. At his worst, he lost 55 pounds, and he's already a small guy. Just really was not looking good for him. But he had a procedure back in December and had a pretty good offseason, was slowly gaining his strength back. I wondered, I mean, I was just worried about the kid like having a good life again. I wasn't even considering him trying to play football. College Game Day did a good segment on him a couple weeks ago, but lo and behold, he was back on the team. He was continuing to build strength. He's clearly the best kicker on this team. They went out and got a transfer in Connor Gibbs from Southern Miss, but he's been highly inconsistent. And then Towns Magoo is a true freshman, or excuse me, was a freshman last year, thrown into the fire and just could not do it. He's 5 of 13 on the season, and so that experiment is kind of over. But McPherson's back. He actually it flared back up about a month ago, right before the season started, and they were really worried. And he did get a little skinnier, but he's been able to keep food down recently, has put on some more pounds, and just week by week getting stronger. And this is the best week he's had. We saw him hit multiple 50-yarders at Tuesday's practice. Hugh Freeze told us today at Thursday's practice he hit 2 51-yard field goals. So they've been doing this song and dance where it's like, where does Alex McPherson feel comfortable from? So that the kick isn't too low to just get blocked. Is it the 40-yard? Is it a 40-yard kick? Is it a 42-yard kick? And then giving another kicker the try on longer stuff. That's not the case anymore. He is their guy everywhere, unless it's like a 58-yarder, which I'm like, don't even kick that. But like, he can kick 50-yard field goals right now, so things are going well for him on special teams. I think Auburn's very confident in him right now if they were to need him late in the game. And then Hudson Cock is another one of these Australian transplants that's become the norm in college football. He's an Oklahoma State transfer who came over after being pretty good for them in the Big 12 over the last couple seasons. Pretty solid. Nothing insane for him so far this season, but solid numbers for him. Yeah, this is a group that led by their coordinator is former Georgia Southern head coach Chad Lunsford, who's been on this Auburn staff before in a support role. Lots of criticism early in the season. I mean, it's just penalties, penalties, penalties. They could not return a kick without getting penalized. And their kick returner is Rayshon Pleasant, who had a touchdown against Baylor and has 3 return touchdowns in his career. So they were getting really frustrated that they couldn't give that guy the opportunity to run back a kick. And so far the last couple of weeks, that aspect of things has been better. Alex McPherson has been better. And so looks to be on the mend overall for this special teams group. And I guess I'll throw the same question back to you because, Auburn fans, if Georgia goes up for a field goal, of course, Auburn fans are going to try to inflict the Jordan-Hare voodoo magic that we see sometimes that goes after kickers. And so tell me about what Georgia looks like at those positions.
Yeah, special teams for the most part has been really solid. I really think Peyton Woodring, the kicker, he's got a chance to be a Luke Groza Award finalist, and I think that his consistency only adds to why a lot of fans were frustrated when Georgia went for it on 4th and 1 against Alabama, where it's like this is an automatic 3 points to tie this game early in the fourth quarter. But he's been reliable, really hasn't been asked to kick a ton to this point in the season, but he's come through really well. Brett Thorson, he deserves a huge shout out in his return from a knee injury he suffered in the SEC title game. I really thought it would be kind of more of this time of the season that he would be coming back, but he winds up coming back. I think that was the Austin Peay game was his first game back. That was back in week 2. He's played really well. Had a phenomenal punt against Kentucky that bounced up and went out on the 1-yard line, and London Humphreys deserves a shout out for the way he played that and kind of olayed it out of bounds to get Kentucky stuck back. And the one thing that I would encourage Auburn fans to keep an eye out for is Zachariah Branch as the punt returner. He's a guy that, he's a big play waiting to happen, whether he's on offense or whether he is returning punts. He made a mistake against Kentucky last week. He fair caught a kick on like the 4-yard line. I don't think you're going to see that happen again because Kirby Smart was immediately in his ear about that mistake. But I think the special teams to this point has been really reliable. And again, if you can consistently flip the field, if you know you can get those 3 points, and maybe when you talk about the returners, really for either of these teams, if you can maybe steal some yardage and set your offense up really well, that could be the difference, Nathan, in winning and losing this game.
Yeah, and I thought Hugh Freeze made a good point today, talking about the hidden yardage that can be found on special teams. One of the areas, too, where you can get some hidden yardage or where you can give it to your opponent, unfortunately, is Auburn missed so many field goals last season, and you don't think about the fact that that's the difference between a kickoff, the difference between trying to pin somebody back, or the difference between, okay, let's not kick this 52-yarder, let's maybe just punt the ball. Auburn hopes that that's not a problem anymore this season because they put their defense in a lot of bad spots last year. Or, as Hugh Freeze went on to say, which I think was a really good point, or your defense gets a stop, and now the other team is punting from midfield, and your offense starts at the 2-yard line. And so all of these things are I think, factors for Auburn when their offense has been so terrible over the last couple of weeks when they've had so many issues. I think these, like you said, hidden yardage in this game maybe don't trot out there. I know I just sung Alex McPherson's praises for working his way back, but 50-yard field goal, unless it's 1 second left in the game, like, what are your odds of doing that? What are your odds of making that kick? Whereas, do you go for it on 4th and 3, 4th and 4? Do you try to just play field position? I think all of these things are on the table for Auburn in this game of you have to make these decisions correctly because this has been a team that's had such a narrow margin for error because of all the other issues we've sat here and touched on.
Let's take a quick break and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about Saturday's game, what both teams have been talking about in the lead up to Saturday night, a little bit more on some of the matchups, and talk about what we think we'll see and maybe throw in some score predictions as well. If you're watching this live, give us your score prediction for this game. I'll be sure to read those out. We love sharing that, and we'll be right back. right, Nathan, looking at this week, what sort of stood out to you from what Hugh Freeze and what the Tigers players have said about this game against Georgia? What has stood out to them about the Bulldogs? And once you follow, I'll kind of give the Georgia side of things.
Yeah, well, I mentioned it. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I think what you said reminded me of how important it is for Auburn to just get back to playing their game on Saturday and particularly on offense because you talked about this Georgia offense finding its groove on the ground and giving credit to the offensive line for Georgia, which hey has played some young guys, has had some different combinations, and yet has run blocked really well. That's a similar sentiment I feel like for Auburn and for any offensive line in the country. We talked to Jeremiah Wright this week, the 6th year offensive guard, and he talking about, hey man, just be honest, being honest. It's like, all right, do you want to run the ball a little bit more? And he was like, it's what every offensive lineman wants. Like that they want to hit somebody, you want to move the line of scrimmage, you want to be a people mover, and they've been good running the football. And so I think that's one area to kind of look at in this game is obviously the matchup with Georgia's defensive front is one thing, but internally Auburn feeling like just getting some confidence back that they can do this thing on offense. Trying to help out where you can in terms of the run game or on early downs, and that's probably the buzzword, those two words, early downs, that have been the biggest thing for Auburn this week. Players and coaches and everybody has talked about because when your average third down distance and in the SEC so far in 2 games is 10.9 yards, you're going to need to do a little bit better than that. Now, penalties have been one factor. You mentioned the Xavier Chaplin thing. I could not believe what I was hearing when Hugh Freeze said that. I was like, "There's no way, man. There's no way you just said your left tackle can't hear." I like this before you play Georgia. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, it is little things like that. It is needing to run the ball better. And then in terms of individual matchups, guys that have been touched on, Gunnar Stockton's running ability. That's something we didn't talk about a ton so far in this show, but that has been highlighted by Auburn's coaches and particularly Auburn's defensive players so far. I think they kind of compare him to a guy like Jackson Arnold, where it's like he maybe is a little bit faster than you think he is, and he's going to be physical and get downhill when he needs to, and has had some key runs so far this season. And then staying on defense, Dylan Bell is the name that came up the most on Tuesday when we talked to Auburn players, just because. And again, you can touch on this because you know more, but using him in different ways, maybe giving him more opportunities to touch the ball in different ways. I think they kind of see him as an X factor in this Georgia offense because everybody knows who Zachariah Branch is. They know they're going to have to know where he is at all times, and then they know Georgia's got a deep stable of running backs. And so I would highlight those few things of like what has been pointed out so far by these coaches and by these players in terms of the Georgia sideline players and facets they'll be paying attention to.
Yeah, I think it's fair to bring up Gunnar Stockton. He's coming off of a two rushing touchdown performance, so I mean he will be used. He will have a chance to run, and I'll be interested how much he runs by design. He had a fantastic, about a 19-yard run in that Kentucky game, a design run. Uh, Mike Bobo's done a pretty good job of taking advantage of his skill set. And yeah, with Dylan Bell, he's a guy that, trying to figure out his role in this offense. I think it's taken Georgia a little bit of time. I mean, this is a guy that has flashed in the past. He contributed as a freshman, and I've really thought the last 2 years had a chance to break out and be like an all SEC caliber receiver. And he wasn't that reliable. He was one of the guys last year that struggled with drops. Coming into this season, him coming back to Georgia, there's a lot of conversation because at times Georgia has used him at running back out of necessity. I mean, they've had seasons they've started where several guys are banged up, and Dylan Bell played some running back in high school, so they've used him there in the comparison to Debo Samuel. And I think they've come into this year more intentionally wanting to use him as a Debo Samuel type. I think his best play of the season was against Alabama, where they ran a jet sweep and they had Zachariah Branch out there and they faked the reverse to Zachariah Branch, and then Dylan Bell just kept running upfield. I mean, went for nearly 40 yards. Dylan Bell, they tried with some of the jet sweeps earlier in the season and just never seemed like it was there, that it could work. But he had a really good game against Kentucky, 2 rushing touchdowns, and bigger than that, a impressive one-handed catch down the sideline for a big gain for Georgia. He's a guy that I think has a lot of confidence, and a guy, truthfully, Nathan, to start the season, I wasn't sure how much of a factor he was going to be specifically with the passing game. I think he's shown in recent weeks that he can't be overlooked. And even if some of the other guys we talked about earlier wind up having more receptions, putting up more yardage, Dylan Bill is going to be a factor for Georgia.
Yeah, it sounds like it kind of fits into that Eric Singleton mold, and I wouldn't be surprised. I know you're going to talk about the Georgia players. I wouldn't be surprised if that's somebody that at least they've been keeping their eye on because of, like you said, he was such a factor for them going against Georgia Tech last season. Fits that similar kind of player where going to have the ball in his hands a lot. They will line up Eric Singleton in the backfield, not necessarily to give him the ball as a running back, but to just eye candy with him because he is an explosive player. He's that explosive slot receiver that can just kind of move all wherever on the field.
Yeah, starting with Eric Singleton, Kirby Smart, very complimentary, as you can imagine. I mean, he's had to scheme against him the last couple of years at Georgia Tech, and he described him as a weapon. He said, he's dangerous, horizontal, vertical, he can do whatever. And I think that Georgia's DBs understand how dangerous he is, Cam Coleman is, and that they can't allow those guys to make a lot of plays. I thought the biggest thing for me listening to Kirby Smart and some of the players. Kirby has not put a ton of stock into those losses on the road. I mean, he, talked about how hard it is to win on the road in the SEC, and I think that some of the offensive line lapses, the sacks, the offense being as ineffective as it was, especially in that A&M game. I think that Kirby realizes that it will be a very different story at home for Auburn, and that they can't put as much stock into that. Looking elsewhere, Lawson Lucky, Georgia's tight end, talked about, how smash mouth this Auburn defense is, and that Georgia has to bring it on offense. That there's a lot of respect that Georgia has for this Auburn defense specifically. I mean, really both sides, but Lawson Lucky talked about how they play defense, and basically Georgia knows it's getting ready for a battle when it comes to lining up against Auburn. And I don't get the sense that anyone in the building in Athens has looked at Auburn's record and said, well, we can go in there and easily win. They recognize it's going to be a fight, and that they're going to have to bring it if they're going to be able to win this game.
Yeah, Jason Caldwell was talking about your story earlier this week where you mentioned Georgia players talking about Auburn being physical on offense, and Jason was like, "Well, I don't know what game they've been watching, but he said maybe they just haven't been showing them the last two games." But to your point, yeah, I mean it, especially when you've done it like Kirby has, when you've been not only on the road in the SEC a million times, but when you've gone to Auburn and seen what they can do as a so-so middling team, but they get an opportunity to have a big home game against you, not only at Georgia, but when he was at Alabama as well. It's like you can't lay down, you can't play, you can't play lightly. I think back to, Kevin Steele is now retired, but he was the defensive coordinator at Alabama, Nick Saban's final season. And that was the season in which they threw that 4th and 31 touchdown. And he and Philip Marshall are pretty close at our site, and they talk pretty often. And, Kevin Steele told Philip about a year ago after he was retired, he was like, yeah, I don't think our players, talking about Alabama, he was like, I don't think our players thought Auburn was any good. Like, it's just, even in a rivalry setting, these are still human beings. They're still teenagers. Like, you still have to make sure they're aware that the other team has good players and is going to try to beat you. And then that game ended up being whatever the score was, very close, much closer than it should have been, with a bad Auburn team and with a really good Alabama team. And so even more so this weekend, because again, Jordan, as we talked about, like, I don't think for the first time in a long time, I know, and it's crazy to think about, if Georgia wins this game, it will tie the longest winning streak by either team in the history of this rivalry, which is a horrifying sentence, in my opinion, if you're Auburn. But it just doesn't feel like these teams that Georgia is overmatching Auburn in a lot of areas. I think they're better overall. They're clearly a better team. They're a better coach team. They've got better talent, but how much more talent in individual positions? I just don't. I think if Auburn plays their game and they get a little bit of home mojo behind them, they now have the players to go out there and hold Georgia in check. Whereas, man, a couple years ago, like I don't necessarily see a Brock Bowers type thing happening again, where it's like, and granted, they don't have Brock Bowers. And I thought that was really funny. Kirby this week, somebody asked him, do you have a go-to player in the fourth quarter? And he's like, are you asking if I'd take Brock Bowers back? Because of course I would. But it's like, I think Auburn is a little bit better equipped to not just get whipped all over the place by a 5-star who's awesome. I think Auburn's got enough players to try to go toe-to-toe with them.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's worth pointing out is even when Georgia had Brock Bowers, I mean, it took Brock Bowers to beat Auburn in Jordan Hare the last time Georgia was there. So I mean, I think it's totally fair to point that out. And yeah, I think there's no doubt the talent gap between these two teams has shrunk significantly. But it's just can Auburn actually take advantage of that?
This would be, and I cautioned back to last season too. And I picked Georgia to win this game, but it's like you can see a lot of avenues where Auburn could get this thing done. I point back to last year too, where the A&M game, Texas A&M comes in here, and it felt like, man, you've got to get this one because that situation was a little bit different. Their season was going not the way they thought it would, but you can sort of salvage a big win, salvage a big home win. You rush the field, you win in 4 overtimes. It's this big fun night on the field. This is kind of a similar situation where your back is against the wall if you're Auburn. I know you're 3-2, and I know you've lost to a couple SEC teams on the road, and you have everything in front of you. Like you could theoretically go 10-2 this season. But when you look deeper and you look at the context of what's happening and the fact that it's year 3, and we're sitting here talking about all this talent, and you actually have to get over the hump. They keep saying that, get over the hump, get over the hump, get over the hump. This is this is a big one. This is really, really big if they can get this thing done on Saturday. And conversely, I'm not saying it's the end of the world if you lose to number 10 Georgia, because it's not. It's a really good team, but it's like it's not if not now when. It's not to that level, but it is like if you can't at least hang with, at least make it an opportunity late in the fourth quarter against a Georgia team that's good, not great on your home field in year 3, what else do you necessarily need at this point? So it's definitely again, we talked about it earlier, like this Georgia Auburn matchup is one of the most. I know Scott Anderson in the comments. I know there's no way Auburn goes 10-2. I'm just saying technically everything is ahead of them this season, and they're only 3-2. But yeah, this is one of the more interesting Georgia Auburn games, in my opinion, that we've had in quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take it 1 week at a time there, Scott. So take it easy there. But you're gonna add something there, Nathan?
I was gonna say, trust me, I do not think Auburn is going 10-2. Trust me.
No, I mean, to your point, if Auburn can at least hang with Georgia, it is a missed opportunity because of the setup and because it's at home and everything that coming off a bye week. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, things that set up well for Auburn, but then you got to go out there and you got to play well to have a chance. Um, Nathan, tell me about the injury situation for Auburn. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon, so we've had one availability report. Any injuries of note on the Auburn side? Anything we need to keep an eye on, even these next few days getting ready for Saturday night?
Yeah, you're good, Scott. He said, I just heard 10-2. That's fair. If you hear in the year of our Lord 2025, Auburn and 10-2 in the same sentence, you should definitely whip your head and be like, who said that? Yeah, nothing new for Auburn, which is good. Definitely in a good spot injury wise. The only two guys who appeared on Wednesday's report are the two guys we've known are going to be out. Darrell Robinson would probably be their number 3 running back right now. He didn't seem to have that big of a role before he got a freak injury. I won't go into the details of it, but he had compartment syndrome in his leg. They had to like cut out a giant sack of blood on his. I said I wasn't going to go into details, but here I am. But yeah, so just a horrible freak thing. And then the one though that like it's not new but should be noted. I thought they missed Horatio Fields against Texas A&M. He's a 4th-year senior, transfer from Wake Forest, just kind of that does everything receiver. He had made a couple really big third down catches for Jackson Arnold early this season on important drives that Auburn went down and scored. So a guy who's reliable, guy who does everything well. And then you get Texas A&M. I'm not saying it's the only reason. Obviously, that was an amalgamation of issues, but like Jackson Arnold's looking out there, and for some reason, he just can't find anybody. Nobody's open. He can't throw the ball. Somebody's open. He still is not throwing the ball to that person. Like, I think you're missing a veteran receiver out there right now with some of the offensive problems you've had. But yeah, other than that, unless something else, and look, nobody's 100% like right now. Like Connor Lewis had a knee thing, but like he'll be fine. He's going to play. As of right now, it's just those two guys. Nothing new for Auburn, and as is the case with Georgia, I know on their side of the injury report, Auburn has had that advantage the last few games of, at the very least, being the healthier team going into it.
Yeah, looking at it from Georgia's perspective, no surprises from what we saw. I mean, the situation to watch right now is going to be Monroe Freeling if he's going to be available. I think he's going to give it a go now. Is he going to play all 4 quarters? That seems like that's probably a stretch, but that would be big at left tackle to protect Gunnar Stockton's blind side and to make sure that he stays upright. Ernest Green's still questionable. I'm not necessarily expecting him to be able to play. He's been dealing with an injury since week one. Guys already ruled out receivers Talon Taylor, Thomas Blackshear, center Malachi Tolliver, guys Ethan Barbour as well, a tight end. Guys that have been hurt, no surprises there. So the situation to watch will be Monroe Freeling with an outside chance Ernest Green might try to be available as well. All right, Nathan, when you look to Saturday night's game, what does Auburn need to accomplish? What are the things that you think the Tigers need to do to have a chance at pulling off this upset?
Yeah, first and foremost, I know turnovers are a big thing in every game. I'm not saying they need to go out and generate a bunch of them to win this game, but they've actually been really, really good in that department this season. Their only turnover through 5 games on offense was in garbage time of a 42 to nothing win over Ball State, and it was a true freshman tight end in garbage time, catching the ball, trying to do too much after the catch, and just fumbled it. Other than that, have not had a single turnover. For all that the criticism that has come Jackson Arnold's way this season, he has not had very many turnover worthy plays. Like, he doesn't put the ball in harm's way. Now he is getting sacked, but it's like he's not turning it over. Continue to do that. That is probably number one, because that is the best formula for giving yourself a chance to win the game and keeping yourself in the game for 4 quarters. On that same note, I think I know offense is going to get a lot of attention in this game, but all the defensive praise I gave to them earlier, that's got to continue to keep working. Your defense has done a great job of keeping you in every game so far. Georgia's going to get yardage. Like, they're a good team with lots of good players. Like, it has not been that type of just Ohio State level shutdown defense for Auburn this season, but the best thing they've done is they get timely stops. None more so than basically a pick six in the fourth quarter against Texas A&M. But even in the other games, it's like a turnover on downs here and a key third down, 3rd and 2 stop there to keep them out of field goal range. Just little things here and there that add up over the course of a game. And then on the offensive side, if Auburn has a decent rushing total, that is going to make a massive, massive difference to take pressure off of Jackson Arnold, both literally and figuratively. Primarily so he doesn't have to drop back on 3rd and 9 over and over again, because this offensive line, as we've touched on many times on this show, has had a lot of issues in pass protecting. I think on its surface, and we saw it against Baylor, we saw it early this season against some bad defenses, this Auburn system can work. This RPO system, theoretically, and going back to what Georgia players are saying, like, in theory, this Auburn offense is really good on paper. Like a run first, quick read, quick throw, break one tackle, yards after catch, receivers, that type of offense. Yeah. Like, that sounds really, really good. It's just like they haven't done it the last 2 games. They turned into, they tried to make Jackson Arnold Peyton Manning, just like dropping him back and throwing it 45 times a game. It's just very confusing. And so the main thing for them is what Hugh Freeze said today: has to look different. It just plain and simple cannot be the same thing they've come to expect against good teams. Something has to change, whether that's the bye week, whether that's improved execution, whether that's better play calling. All of those things need to be factors. And so obviously I'll flip the question over to you in the same way of, I know Georgia has not been perfect really in any game so far this season. Obviously Tennessee had chances to win that game on the road and basically shot itself in the foot with an opportunity to win it, for Georgia to have a better performance than they did a couple weeks ago against Alabama, which I know was a very disheartening game for them. What do they need to do in this one to get a rivalry win?
Kind of give a point on offense and a point on defense. Offense, I think it's just about starting fast. Tennessee game, especially being on the road, you fall behind 21-7, and it was teetering early. And give credit to Georgia offense and defense for the way it responded. Alabama, you fall behind 14-0, and especially doing that at home, it's sort of like the fans in the stands are like, "Here we go again," and that does affect the energy. And you look at playing at Auburn Saturday night in Jordan-Hare, it's no secret that some strange things can happen there, and even the best teams struggle. So I think Georgia needs to come out and, but within like that first 2 possessions, at least get a field goal. Do not get yourself in a situation where, Nathan, I've looked at this game a lot, and I just can't help but keep going back to 2023. And if you'll remember, Auburn built a 10-0 lead. I think that was just in the first quarter, and it put the pressure on Georgia to respond. So, starting fast, not allowing Auburn to jump out to a lead, I think is big. And then looking at the defense, I just think it's as simple as getting to Jackson Arnold. this is a pass rush that to this point has not lived up to the expectations. Again, Kirby feels like it's there and they have the potential. And I think the fact that they have not moved a lot of personnel around and given more snaps to this guy or that tells me that there is some honesty there, that they like who they're putting out there. But those guys have to deliver. If we're not hearing Gabe Harris or Quintavious Johnson or Jordan Hall, some of those guys getting after Jackson Arnold consistently, I just think that that does not bode well for Georgia's chances. You've got to do that. Can't give a quarterback like that a lot of time. And really, more importantly, you just can't allow him to let those receivers get downfield. If those guys have opportunities, if you're not pressuring Jackson Arnold, I think that that sets up for Auburn to put a lot of drives together. Probably more importantly, create some explosive plays, which I was surprised, Nathan, a story I wrote on Thursday. They haven't really had a ton of explosive pass plays. Georgia's pass rush has to make sure that does not change on Saturday night.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's just the opportunities have been limited because of how far they've been set back. And I mentioned Jackson Arnold's inability to look down the field the last couple games. And also they things could be a lot different. And I definitely agree with Hugh Freeze and some people at Auburn when they say that they've been close. I definitely agree with the Oklahoma game because number one, there was that missed call where it was like, well, that's just terrible, and the SEC had to issue a statement. But he has Cam Coleman wide open for a touchdown, like 5 yards behind the defense, just overshoots him. So who knows what would have happened there if he had connected with him. And so yeah, it's a mix between the situations they put themselves in. But yeah, I mean, you would have expected this Auburn offense. Again, you look at the personnel. I haven't even mentioned Malcolm Simmons, but a really good number 3 receiver for this team who has explosive and fast. He has it written all over him in terms of an athlete. Just getting guys in positions to succeed. You mentioned the play calling with a guy like Mike Bobo has done that well for Georgia's players. It's now on Auburn the rest of the season. Hugh Freeze is now calling it season 2 after the bye week. Season 1 being complete. He says that he thinks they can be a different team. They can be a better team in season 2, and obviously no better time to prove it now and prove that you've got enough players to go out there and finally get a win in this series.
All right, let's get into score predictions, Nathan. I'm going to take Georgia 23-17. Again, I think this is a 4-quarter fight, and I think that this is going to be a situation where each quarterback is put in a position late in the game to decide who wins this game. And I think that Gunnar Stockton, about midway through this fourth quarter, I think he's going to lead a touchdown drive that puts Georgia back in front. I just don't trust Jackson Arnold. I just don't trust Hugh Freeze. And again, it's a situation. I think it sets up really, really well for Auburn to win at home. It's been a while. It's been since 2017 that Auburn won it all, and that was, against Georgia, and that was in Jordan-Hare. But I just don't trust that Auburn offense to fully take advantage. I think it's going to be a tight game, but I'm taking Georgia 23-17. They escape Jordan-Hare and get a hard-earned win. What do you got? How do you see this thing playing out? And if you want to give a score, go for it.
Yeah, I keep getting this strange feeling about Auburn in this game and that they have a real opportunity here. I think it's because of all the factors we talked about, and them not necessarily being super overmatched as a team in any one area. Again, they've known this is a night game. This is the most anticipated Auburn home game. I was talking about somebody the other day. They played Penn State in week 2 of Brian Harson's second season. And that's hilarious to look back at because they got absolutely dog walked in that game. But you didn't know that at the time. All that you knew was that it was an orange out. You were welcoming Penn State to Auburn. It was a massive, massive opponent. And actually, that Auburn team was set up decently well. They had okay players, and then obviously it just turned into a complete disaster. The Iron Bowls are always exciting. Georgia games are always exciting. But because of just context and circumstances, this is probably the most anticipated Auburn home game since then. So that's a little over 4 years. And so for all those reasons, I think it will be a 4-quarter game. I think Auburn's defense puts them in position here to have an opportunity to win the game. I'm still at the point where I can't give it to them. The people at our site will know I have not picked Auburn in a Power 4 game yet this season. They beat Baylor. I didn't do it in week 1. I was like, no. And you showed me a little bit there, but since then you have regressed my expectations a little bit. Yeah, I think the pieces are in place for them to have a really competitive game on Saturday, but I end up picking Georgia 21-14. And again, I mentioned Christian's pick of like this is just going to go the way we don't think it's going to. You remember the Iron Bowl that Auburn won in 2019 is 48-45. It's like that didn't come out of nowhere. There were good offensive players on those teams, but sometimes these rivalry games. I mean, I don't have to tell you that the Georgia Tech game last year, like sometimes this stuff just goes off the rails when games are played between rivals like this, and so I do think it has the propensity to be a game like that. But knowing what we do about Kirby at this point, I I do think there is the capability of this to be a get right game for Georgia's pass rush. Like that, you in terms of individual matchups and individual outcomes, if you tell me after Saturday that Georgia, a pass rush that Kirby Smart has said is pretty good, they just haven't put up like huge numbers. If they finally get those results, if they finally drag the quarterback down instead of just getting a pressure or a hurry, I would not be surprised. Like you have the opportunity to do that against Auburn, and so wouldn't be surprised either way. Wouldn't be surprised if Auburn pulls off an upset. Of course, we mentioned all the factors that go into that, but at this point, still can't do it. Still cannot pick Auburn to get a win in the spot until they, as Hugh Freeze uses the quote over and over again, until they get over that hump. If they get over this hump, talk to me next week when they get Missouri at home at night. Maybe our thoughts will be a little bit different on that. But until then, I'm picking Georgia. And as I said, Jordan, you mentioned the last time Auburn won a game in this series. Like, I mean, you've been around this series your whole life. Like, it's wild to think about, and it is. You got 4 straight losing seasons right now for Auburn. It's scary times for Auburn. Like the fact that Georgia could beat you 9 straight times is in a series that actually is pretty well in terms of matchups. Is pretty evenly matched, honestly, until very recently. Um, it's scary. It's scary times if things don't go Auburn's way this season, and what they do about that in the future. If they were to lose this game and lose a bunch more games this season, we'll see. Have a big opportunity to do the opposite on Saturday, though.
If Georgia were to win, that would tie the longest winning streak in this series history. Georgia won every meeting from 1923 to 1931, and you don't ever want to go that far back, Nathan, when it comes to a rivalry series.
Nope, don't want to do that.
Go through some of the other scores. Shout out to Brad Span on YouTube. He's got Georgia 31-17. Predicting Noah Thomas's first touchdown as a Bulldog. That's a pretty lofty prediction, so we'll see if that happens. Over on Dawgs247, Ben Wolk has Georgia 27-20. Olivia Sayer has Georgia 24-16. And Kip Adams has Georgia 28-21. Nathan, thanks so much for popping on this podcast. Before we end it, do want to give you the opportunity, shout out what you guys got going on at Auburn Undercover, what you guys are working on, where folks can follow you, just all that good stuff before we end this episode.
Yeah, it's been a fun couple weeks, as our readers and subscribers know, with the basketball change. It's just been a lot going on. It's certainly never a dull moment, and we didn't touch on it at all this podcast, but it'll be fun to see big pomp and circumstance at halftime for Cam Newton. He's getting his jersey retired, only the 4th player in Auburn history to get his jersey retired. So obviously that's a really big deal for him. For our Auburn listeners, I will have a story on Friday morning that is going to have to get cranked out in a large part after later today as we record this on Thursday. But I just talked to a ton of people about Cam, and it's probably going to end up being just like a giant list of small anecdotes. I don't really see how it could be anything else. Like, I'm not going to write the definitive Cam Newton feature in 2025. Like, it's just not going to happen. So we'll see what it turns out being. But yeah, really looking forward to this weekend. Looking forward to seeing you back in Auburn. And on a similar note for Georgia fans, tell them what you got going on over at Dawgs247.
Well, first off, Nathan, with a feature like that, due tomorrow. So, you can knock it out in no time. Dawgs247.com. We got a great staff over there. I mentioned myself, Ben Wolk, Kip Adams, Olivia Sayer. They're all doing great stuff. Ben handling our recruiting coverage. He's doing a fantastic job. Getting ready for next week when Georgia hosts Ole Miss. That will be a very important visit weekend for Georgia. You got the Junkyard Dogcast. If you want to follow us there, got a chance to get our stuff up on YouTube at Dawgs247, on TikTok. A lot of good content, and hope you guys will follow along. Getting ready for what I think will be a very entertaining edition of the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Well, Nathan, before we get out of here, anything else you want to throw in?
I don't think so. Been looking forward to this one, like I said, for a while now. Auburn has a tremendous home atmosphere, and you're gonna see it on Saturday. They've even made some upgrades. They've got a new video board. Um, the coolest thing they'll do if any Georgia fans are in the building, um, in it for a night game. If a player scores, like Jeremiah Cobb scored a touchdown against Ball State when it turned a night game at that point, they put the player's signature in the other end zone. It's pretty cool looking, except for some Auburn fans after the last couple of games said, "I'm excited to see that again against Mercer in Week 12." So maybe they'll give them some reason to enjoy it on Saturday night. But yeah, I mean, should be incredible. Not just Auburn, but any SEC venue in a night game in a rivalry spot. You certainly have to pitch yourself sometimes to have the opportunity to do it. And Jordan, how many Auburn-Georgia games is this for you now? By the way,
Oh man, that would probably at this point, this has got to be like my 10th. I mean, going back to when I was a student, and I've seen some pretty entertaining ones. I saw, Todd Gurley when he came back from injury and had a big game at home, froze in the stands in Athens for that one. Actually missed the prayer at Jordan Hare because I had to work, and I got text, Nathan, I swear no one gave me any context, and I was really like, did somebody die? Like that was the level of the text I got. So
oh
no,
my
like this is
gosh,
this is like my 10th one. So how many would this be for you?
not that many actually. I have missed Auburn-Georgia games for various reasons. When I was a freshman was 2016 at Auburn, and I was in the band, so I would have gone, but I didn't. We were visiting my grandfather who passed away the next week, but I do have a memory actually watching that game with him. Another person I was with, uh, somebody who was the quarterback in 2016. I know Trey Matthews intercepted it for Auburn.
Oh man,
Uh,
you're
was it
testing
Lambert?
me. Yeah,
Lambert?
probably Grayson Lambert.
He throws a pick in the end zone, and the person I was with jumped up in the living room and punched a little bit of the drywall in the ceiling of my grandfather's house. And so my grandfather, who was very close to passing away, still had a pretty mad reaction to that. So that was pretty good. But yeah, I guess let's see. They were 2-17. My brother got married in 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. This will be 9 for me. Sorry, 8. I didn't go to the COVID year one because I just started 24/7. Yeah. So like I was saying, like it's crazy, man, to think about number one, having the opportunity to be at some of these games, but as I mentioned earlier, on a bit of a gloomier note, the opportunity here for Georgia to, I mean, they've already taken a stranglehold of this series, and I thought Philip Marshall wrote a great column at our site this week of like how close was Kirby to being Auburn's head coach. Who knows what would have happened if that had happened? Would he have come home to Georgia eventually? Obviously, Gus had plenty of success at Auburn. It's just a wild rivalry, and certainly I think it matters for Georgia that Kirby Smart knows this rivalry, and it's very near and dear to him, and he obviously has a lot of motivation every year to go out and beat Auburn.
Yeah, it's always fun because of the overlap between the fans of the fan bases, the two fan bases, and what the rivalry means to folks. And then, even you go back with Pat Dye with the ties to both teams, and Vince Dooley with the ties to both teams. I think that only makes it more special, and I think the fans will have plenty to get to cheer about really on both sides Saturday night. I
Yeah,
think we're getting ready for a really entertaining game. So we'll end this dual podcast between the Auburn Undercover podcast and the Junkyard Dogcast. Thanks to everyone who watched and everyone who listened. We really appreciate that, and excited to get to this game on Saturday night. So we'll end it right there. For Nathan King, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.